Okay, we get back to our Gemara and Shabbos related to Chanukah. Merchav Gimel Amud Aleph, 23a. We're in the middle of the page. The line begins with the word Nahid Tzvei, and then there's like that acronym Vav Aleph Reish Yud Beis Lamed, which stands for Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. So the last thing we stated was what is the choicest fuel for the flame of the menorah of the Chanukah light? And we said that the answer is olive oil. And the Gemara noted that Rabbi said of his teacher Rabbi that initially he would look for sesame oil because it lasted longer. And he figured the best is to make the flame last as long as possible. And then once Rabbi had heard that which Rabbi Shua ben Levi taught, that the best is oil, he understood that what's prime is that having a clear flame takes precedent over it lasting longer. So even if sesame oil lasts longer, the flame is much clearer one. The light is much brighter and clearer one when it's burning from olive oil. That's where we are right now. So having now discussed the virtues of olive oil, the Gemara now and specifically the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, that paper there, specifically the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, the Gemara now quotes another statement by Rabbi Shua ben Levi, which extols the virtues of olive oil specifically, but in a different context. Rabbi Shua ben Levi further stated, Kol hashmanim, all oils, all fuel, yafin l'diyai is good for ink. Shemen zayis and olive oil min hamuvchar is the best. Now, what does that mean? What's this? Well, what does flames have to do with ink? So Rashi explains for us that he found that the process he found in an earlier text. Where is it, Rashi? No, it's towards the top. That the process of making ink was as follows. So I found in the response of the Gaonic period, so it's a century or so, 2 centuries before Rashi. They would take a glass and kind of hold it on top of a flame so that the whole thing became covered in smoke, with like a soot from smoke. And then and the smoke specifically produced by a flame burning from olive oil, until the whole glass became black from the soot. And then they would remove that soot, the black soot. I think it's the word soot, right? Soot. And then they would put a drop of oil into that soot. How do you pronounce it? Soot. And then they would mix the oil and this black soot together. Can't pronounce it properly. And they would dry it up in the sun. And then they would mix that black mixture into oil. So there's into ink. So there's 2 points at which the oil might be used in the process of making ink. One, to create the soot. Pronouncing is wrong for sure. And the other is, once it's made, to remove that black stuff and mix it into oil, which is then dried out and put into ink. I guess it helps the ink in some way. Yeah. Okay, so he's not using this from the menorah, God forbid. He's not using the menorah to produce. He's not using this from the menorah. He's just doing this on, it would be, you're right. Yeah, because it's not, even if you're using that ink to write the Torah, it's preparation of a mitzvah, right? So, which we discussed earlier would certainly be a violation. But he's just talking about in general. The best oil to use for this part of the process of making ink is olive oil. And because, as I mentioned, there are 2 stages that require olive oil. A, creating that black stuff. And then number 2, taking that black stuff and mixing it in oil, which is then dried out and put into the ink. Oh, I'm writing a Torah, writing... That's what Rabbi Shua ben Levi says. The best is olive oil. But for which part of the process? For making the smoke, or for then taking the stuff and mixing it into oil? So at which point is olive oil best? right? Because you can produce the smoke with any kind of fuel. And then you can mix that stuff into any kind of oil and then dry it out and mix it into your ink. But Rabbi Shimon Levi is saying that the best of them is olive oil. So for which part of the process is olive oil best? That's what the Gemara is about to ask now. And the Gemara asks, the following question or inquiry was posed. They asked of him, actually, it was asked of them. Legabel, is this the statement that olive oil is the best for the process of Iboya Lahu? They asked of him, yes. So it must have been a bunch of people asking of him. Yeah, Legabel, is this for the mixing part that once the soot is produced to mix it with oil, or to create the smoke, which will produce this black stuff? So for which part of the process is olive oil the choicest? So Tashma, the Gemara says, come and listen to the following text, which might resolve the question. Tani, for we've learned, Rav Shmuel bar Zutra, Rav Shmuel, son of Zutra, said, all oils are good for the process of making ink, and olive oil is choicest. This is the same statement as Rabbi Shimon Levi. But here he adds, Bein legabel, whether you're talking about the point of mixing this black stuff into olive oil, Bein la'ashin, whether you're talking about producing the black stuff to begin with, the smoke. So it would seem, therefore, that the olive oil is best for both parts of the process, both to produce this black soot in this glass, and both to then mix that black stuff into olive oil, dry it out, and put it into the ink. So this was the statement that was raised to answer the question. Now, Rav Shmuel bar Zitra himself, however, Zitra, that's wondering. No, 1 second, they're both the same. No, they're both from the Aleph here. They're both the same name. Both the same name. Arshbal is different. Here it's the same. And I don't see a note on the side to change it. It's the same one. I think it's Shmuel bar Zitra quoting Rabbi Shimon Levi differently. I think that's what it is. But here there's no note in that. I just understood that which was Shmuel bar Zitra teaching the teaching of Rabbi Shimon Levi differently. But you're saying it's different people. Even though over here in the Gemara, in our version of the Gemara, at least the one I'm looking at here, has the exact same name without any note to change. Okay, either way, Rabbi Shmuel bar Zitra, Masni Hachi, Rabbi Shmuel bar Zitra taught as following. Whoever is speaking now is certainly talking about how we should understand Rabbi Shimon Levi, which is, quote, Kol Hashanim, not Kol Hashmanim. The original statement was all oils are good for ink. Now he's saying Kol Hashanim Yofen L'Doy, all smoke is good for ink. So clearly, in this version, the original statement itself stipulates that the statement on the choiciousness of olive oil is specifically for creating a smoke. And therefore, Kol Hashanim, all smoke, Yofen L'Doy, is good for the process of making ink, but olive oil is the choicest of them to produce the best kind of smoke, to produce the best soot, to then be mixed into your ink. Furthermore, Amar Rav Huna said, all in the process of making ink, Kol Hasrafin, Yofen L'Doy, all burnt up stuff. Sorry? Yeah, sorry. Straf is not burnt up stuff. Straf is like a sap. Sorry, sap is the best for oil. I guess it's another ingredient. The straf kataf and for ink. It's different ingredients for ink. Right? Ink was a big business back in the old day to see how well it sticks to the paper, how quickly it dries. Yeah, it was a big thing. Oil would be added, or is it made? No. So one part of the process of making the ink is producing the soot, which is then mixed with oil, which is then dried out and then mixed into the ink. You have to have a blank pot. What do you put in there? Gemara doesn't tell us here. The Gemara assumes we know, and then. The oil is an ingredient. It's an ingredient, yes, and it's actually not even the oil itself. It's oil producing a smoke, producing soot. And then that soot mixed with oil. Right, but smoke, if you put a glass on top of it, and the smoke gets caught in the glass, the smoke will produce a black sort of soot. And then you collect that, mix it with a little bit of oil, let it dry out in the sun, and then crush that up into your ink mixture. And somehow it produces, I guess, an adhesive or some sort of positive element for your ink. But it doesn't tell us what the actual ingredient for the ink is. I have not the slightest clue. Sorry? Yes, so that's what we're saying now. Another ingredient in the actual, well, that's what we use for Sefer Torah. That's what Bic uses for their pens. Or that's what we use. That's what we use for Torah. We use that for Torah. I know that, but I'm not sure that necessarily that Parker is using gauntlets. I'm not even. I have not a clue. But so the Gemara is telling ancient ink. So one of the main ingredients is a sap. A sap, because a sap is a sort of density, and then they would mix it with some sort of coloring. So the Gemara sometimes talks about smoke is one of them. The Gemara sometimes talks about different small berries. They'll produce a color, but then if that's too thin, if they mix with other things to bait, and then they would use sorry. Yeah, that's a unique circumstance. But I'm saying in ancient times when they were producing it in mass, they also used nuts. Sorry. Yeah. The Gemara also talks about certain types of reeds. If I remember correctly, the Gemara talks about certain reeds also. Reeds that had some sort of like the mud at the. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so the Gemara here is saying that all saps are good for ink, whatever this ingredient is. The sirat kataf and the sap produced by kataf, which Steinsaltz translates as balsam, Yafim Mikulan, the best of them all. Sap is like the oil of the tree. It's like the sap is syrup. Syrup is a form of sap, right? As in maple syrup. Yes, not corn syrup. Okay, so that's for the Gemara's commentary on ink and what the best ingredients are. So for any of you who want to produce ink, now you have some good tips. Okay, now the Gemara. Sorry. So there's a lot of elements to it. Ink. First of all, you want it to be able to. First of all, has to be liquidy, but not too runny. Because if it's too runny, it'll just run down the page. So it has to have a certain adhesive which will stay in one place. You want it to dry quickly, because the quicker it dries, the less likely it is that you'll accidentally smudge it when you're writing further. You want it to last long. You also want it to be able to, that you can scrape it off, and if you made a mistake, and put a new thing, especially some parchment or even papyrus, which they had it back in then too. It doesn't necessarily mean he's talking about Torah ink here. It doesn't say so specifically, just saying in general. It's a comment on life. Sure, ink was a very big business, and it was like a whole thing to find a good ink producer who knows the exact proper ingredients to make a good ink. Certainly, it was a big thing, which lasted for many years until basically the Industrial Revolution, when they started to mass produce these things. Essentially, you have to rely on some guy who knows how to do it properly. Okay. Yeah, that's specific ingredients that is meant for use of Torah. The gallnuts, I guess, is the main ingredient there. It's boiled to a certain degree, and it's let to what's the word? It's called sorry. No. Whatever. You melt the thing. Is a certain word for it. When you melt something in a pot. No. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's a whole process to making the ink for the Torah. Yeah, just reminds me of this. We're talking about this ink. They say about the second Chabad Rebbe. So you're talking about even after the Industrial Revolution already began. He would write so quickly that by the time he got to the bottom of the page, the top of his page was still wet. The ink on the top of the page was still wet. That's how quickly he would write. He was very, very. They would say he was very, very. The expression about him was that if you cut his hand, he wouldn't bleed blood. He would bleed chassidus. That was the expression, and he would almost, like, when I say the words, get carried away in his writing. But sometimes he would keep on writing, and he would forget to turn the page, and he'd keep on writing onto his desk. He was like very, very. His mind, he sometimes speak for hours and hours, literally hours and hours straight, teaching chassidus, very at length, very prolific. And it was like a stream of consciousness that would come out of his hand and mouth, writing or speaking chassidus. Anyway, just saying, this ink business was a very big part of life, especially if you're in the world of scholarship and you want to preserve for posterity your ideas and writings. I think it's a big deal. Okay, now we're back to the halachas of the menorah. Specifically, we get to the issue of the bracha. So there's about the middle of the page of Chav Gimel Mud Aleph 23a. The line begins with the word Visraf, Kataf, Yatim, Mikulam. There's a colon, and then it says Aleph Reish, Amar Rab. Amar Rab Chi, it's a little bit lower in the middle. Yeah, it's a little bit lower in the middle. Amar Rab Chi Bar Ashi. Rabbi Chi Bar Ashi said, Amar Rab Minim of Rav. Hamadlik Ner Chanukah, one who lights the Chanukah candle, Sarach Levarech, must make a blessing. Shocking statement, no? It is, because it's only a rabbinic commandment, not a biblical one. And yet we're told you have to make a bracha. And the moment the Gemara is going to get into when exactly, what kind of rabbinic commandments do we make a blessing? Why do we make a blessing? And what kind of rabbinic commandments do we not make a blessing? But for now, we just know, as a matter of fact, that even though this is not a biblical commandment, we'll still say the blessing. For you, God, have sanctified us to command us to light the menorah. When did he command us? It's not the Torah, right? So, but we already know that this statement has some sort of, it's not so obvious as, say, making a blessing on tefillin. So we already have the statement, you have to make a blessing on the menorah. We'll discuss why and how momentarily. Rav Yirmiyah adds, not only does one who light the menorah have to make a candle, have to make a blessing, but Haraya Ner Chanukah, one who sees the flame of the Chanukah, Tzarech Levarech, must make a blessing too. Rashi notes for us that this is not referring to anybody who sees a candle anytime. This is only somebody who sees a candle but is not going to light it at home. Because he's on a boat, as Rashi puts it. He's in a boat, so he sees at a distance somebody else's, and he makes the blessing. We're not going to go down this halachic route because it's a very, very complex issue. But let's just say, like we talked about before, the person's out of town and he's relying on the fact that his wife is lighting the menorah at home. Remember we talked about that? The person could be out of town and can be, in theory, relying on the fact that his wife is lighting at home. So this person, let's just say that guy, sees a menorah, so now he can make a blessing too. In a moment, we'll see which one he will be. So Rav Huda explains, on day one, Haraya, the one who sees a menorah, and he's not lighting at home, Mavarech Beis would make two blessings. Umadlik, the one who is lighting, Mavarech Gimel makes three blessings on day one. Mikan ve'elech, from here going forward, day 2, 3, 4, and so on. Madlik, the one who's lighting the menorah, Mavarech Shtayim, makes two blessings. The Raya, and the one who sees, Mavarech Achas, makes one. So what are these blessings? The three blessings that a person lighting the menorah on day one would be acknowledging the mitzvah, the one who sanctified us with the commandments and commanded us to light the menorah. Blessing A. Blessing B is the miracle. For you have made miracles for us. And 3, Shechianu, thanking God for bringing us to the occasion with the opportunity to light the menorah. Okay, so a person who is not lighting menorah only sees the menorah. Which of the three blessings would he drop? He's only writing. Rabbi Yirmiyah said he's taking 2. Which of the 2 would he do? Which of the 3 would he drop? The blessing to light the menorah, because he's not lighting the menorah, but he's seeing a representation of the miracle. Okay, so he's going to make a bracha for the miracle, and then he's going to make shechianu because it's the first night of Chanukah, and he's thanking God for the opportunity to be at Chanukah and see the menorah. Okay, but he's not going to make the blessing to light the menorah. And then day 2 and so on, the person lighting the menorah is still making a blessing for lighting the menorah because he's still lighting. He's still making a blessing for the miracle, as we're going to learn, because the miracle is ongoing. But he's going to drop the shechianu. He's going to drop thanking God for the opportunity because hasn't been so long since last opportunity. He just did it yesterday. And the same thing with the person viewing the menorah. He doesn't make the blessing for lighting the menorah. He didn't do that yesterday either. He's making the blessing for the miracle because he's still seeing a miracle. And again, he's no longer making the blessing of shechianu because he already saw the miracle yesterday. Okay, and that's the Gemara says. My memayit, which bracha does he drop on? Do each of these people respectively drop on day 2, 3, 4 going forward? Right? Memayit's man. He lets go of the blessing of thanking God for bringing us to the occasion, shechianu. Leaving the person lighting the menorah with 2 blessings and leaving the one who sees the menorah with 1 blessing. With me? Gemara asks, maybe he should keep shechianu because every single day is a new mitzvah. And thank God I've been made it back to day 2 of Chanukah. Keep that there. And he should drop the issue of the miracle because the miracle only happens at the beginning. When the oil becomes a miraculous oil. Maybe that's the way it should be. So drop the bracha on miracle, because that already was accomplished yesterday, and stick with the Shechianu, stick with the thank God I've come to this occasion. Thank God I make the day 2 of Chanukah. I haven't been at day 2 for Chanukah since last year. Thank God I make the day 3 of Chanukah. I haven't been in day 3 of Chanukah since last year, and so on. And if the Gemara says no, Nes kol yom asya, the miracle was every single day. Because the miracle is every single day, therefore it makes the blessing a miracle every day. But Chanukah, once you arrive at Chanukah, is already arrived at Chanukah. No reason to thank God every day for arriving at the new day. Enter Chanukah, you make the blessing. Now, this idea that the miracle happened every day is a huge discussion. It's the famous question known as the Beis Yosef's question, which is why day 1 of Chanukah is a miracle, when seemingly it wasn't a miracle. Seemingly, the first day was natural enough to burn. Get enough oil for one day. The miracle starts on day 2. And he has all kinds of answers. And there's a book published dedicated just to that answer. And if I'm not mistaken, it has 101 answers, maybe more. But I'm not mistaken, it's a full book. It's one book dedicated to answering this one question, known as the Beis Yosef's question. Even though the question is addressed earlier, but the Beis Yosef elaborates on it and collects quite a few answers. And the Rabbi has a talk on this answer. But at any rate, the point is the miracle happens every day. And Rashi, I was thinking about it just now as I was preparing the Gemara earlier. Rashi says here, I'm commenting on the fact that the miracle happens every day. He says Rashi, Kol Yom Asya, every day there was a miracle. Shardei Kol Shmona Hidliku Min HaPach, because all 8 days they lit from the jug. Every day they lit from the jug. What's he implying? What does that mean? Every day they lit from the jug. That's how he explains every day there's a miracle. So it would seem, could be, that he's picking one of the answers that the Beis Yosef gives, which is that every day they put a little bit into the menorah. Every day they poured 1/8. And that's the question that's the question which leads others to give other answers. To reject that answer, because why would you on day 1 pour 1/8, assuming there's going to be a miracle? Pour the whole thing in and see what happens. So according to another opinion, they did that. And then every single day, so there was one opinion that every day they pour that in and the jug was still full. Another opinion is they poured the whole thing in and every day it only burned 1/8. Another opinion is that every day it finished to the bottom and then miraculously, no, because then day 1 wouldn't be a miracle. Right, all different answers. Sorry? Those are the main answers. The Rebbe's answer is actually, the main question the Rebbe has a problem with all of these. The main reason why the Rebbe has a problem with all these answers is because the problem is 2 things. On the one hand, if the oil is miraculous, or let's say the jug refills every time you empty it, right? So first of all, then the miracle is not on day 1. The miracle is only day 2, right? Because day 1 was natural oil, because you emptied it out. The miracle is in the fact that day 2 you had new oil. Okay, but let's say you say, that's one answer also. The finding the oil, another answer that there was the battle is another reason to celebrate day 1.
The other thing is, even the first day it wasn't enough for the whole night, a little bit.
Yeah.
That's way too much.
It's another way of answering, but one of the big questions that has is, it's questionable whether or not you're allowed to use a miraculous thing for a mitzvah. In halacha. Whether you're allowed to do that. And everybody comes to the conclusion, it's a very deep answer and very subtle, but he talks about this idea of something simultaneously being natural and simultaneously being miraculous. For example, I haven't learned this talk in a very long time, but this is from my memory. There's, for example, the Aron, the Ark in the Holy of Holies, is famously Makam Ha'aron Ein Min Hamida. The space of the Aron, which means it's a natural phenomenon, takes up space, but simultaneously didn't take up space. So simultaneously a natural phenomenon, but also miraculous phenomenon simultaneously. And that's what everyone maintains, that the entire time it was simultaneously a natural oil burning and simultaneously miraculously not burning, allowing it to burn in the next second. So by simultaneously the miracle is existing for all 8 days, and at the same time it's all natural and halachically acceptable, because otherwise you're stuck on one or two ends. Either the miracle happened in 1 second, and the oil became naturally more dense, in which case the miracle is only at the beginning, not throughout the rest of the 8 days. Or you're stuck with the issue that the entire time it's burning a miraculous oil, in which case halachically it's questionable. And if there are kinds of, does this hybrid, by explaining that there's a oil which is simultaneously natural and miraculous at the same time. It's a little bit subtle and not for our discussion. But anyway, it comes down to this, because the point is the miracle happens every day, and therefore the miracle of Nes, the bracha of Nes, the bracha she'asal nisim, is to be said every day, and the only bracha we drop is the bracha of Shechianu, because once day 1 happens, you've been in Chanukah and finished. Because once day 1 of Chanukah hits, you've arrived at the occasion of Chanukah, no reason to thank Hashem the next day. The same way we only make a Shechianu on the first day of Sukkot, not the second day of Sukkot. The fact that we do is because it could be that today's the first day. But on day 3, we certainly don't make a bracha Shechianu, and not on day 4. Right? Okay. Okay, we'll do one more line, which will introduce us to the next part of the discussion, which we alluded to earlier. The Gemara asks, "My Mavarach, what blessing do you make on the menorah? What blessing do you make?" Says the Gemara, "Mavarach, make the blessing, Asher Kedishanu Mitzvos Avitzivanu. Blessed are you, God, Lord, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with His commandments. Mitzivanu, and He's commanded us, Lahadlik Ner Chanukah, to light the Chanukah lights." The Gemara then asks Jacob's question, where did you command us? Nowhere in biblical text does Hashem command to light the menorah. So how could we say in our bracha, thank you Hashem for commanding us to light the menorah? You never commanded us. So says the Gemara, Rav Avya says, Miloi Sasser. From the verse, Loi Sasser. The verse reads, Torah commands, thou shalt not stray from the instruction of the sages to right or left. So the Torah commands that we follow the instruction of the sages. And the sages instructed us to light the menorah. So by default, we've been commanded. This is how Rambam understands this Gemara. Rambam explains it that way. That the Torah commands, listen to the sages. And the sages say, light the menorah. So we're following Hashem's command by following the sages and lighting the menorah. So even though you didn't command us to light the menorah, you commanded us to listen to those who tell us to light the menorah. Answer 1. Answer 2, Nechemia Amar. The verse reads, Sha'ala vicha v'yageitcha. The verse reads, ask your father and he shall inform you. Zekenecha, your elders, your sages, v'yoyim and they will tell you. Now this verse is slightly different than the previous verse. The previous verse, I'm reading this into the Gemara, even though there's many different ways of reading the Gemara, but I'm reading it this way specifically because there's a famous dispute between Rambam and Ramban how to understand this idea that Hashem commanded us to listen to the sages and therefore there's a mitzvah. So as I mentioned, the Rambam says that the commandment comes from God to listen to the sages. And the sages commanded us to light the menorah. So when we say thank you Hashem for commanding us to light the menorah, we mean it by extension. We don't mean thank you for commanding us to light the menorah. What we really mean is thank you for commanding the sages, who then in turn commanded us to light the menorah, which is more accurately read in the first verse we just quoted, do not stray from the words of the sages. But then there's another verse which says, ask your fathers and they will tell you, ask your elders and they will inform you. And in this verse, it's not so much God is saying, listen to everything they say, but God's instructing you to ask them, as if to say, God's saying, I empower them to decide what I want. And this is more the way that Ramban understands this, which is not that we thank Hashem for commanding us to follow the sages who in turn commanded us to do the menorah. But we thank you, Hashem, for empowering the sages to relay your commandments. And therefore the sages themselves, through divine intuition, commanded us that which Hashem wanted us to do. So it's the translation of the bracha is much more accurate than the Ramban's translation. Thank you for commanding us to light the menorah through the sages. But the commandment came from you, God. In Rambam's view, the commandment to light the menorah did not come from God. The commandment to light the menorah came from the sages. And Hashem commanded, listen to the sages. Whereas in Ramban's view, the mitzvah came from you, Hashem, through the sages. Because the verse says, I empower the sages for that you ask them what to do. I'm reading these two verses. You can read both of these verses either in the opinion of the Ramban or both verses in the opinion of the Rambam. I'm reading it in so you kind of see in the verses themselves. One verse is saying, don't, follow everything they say. one way of looking at it. Or the other verse says, ask them and they'll tell you what I want. As if to say, Hashem is saying, I empower them with divine intuition to tell you, to carry out my will, exactly. And if the mitzvah of Menorah comes from Hashem himself, happens to be through the sages. Sorry? Well, the story of Chanukah doesn't happen until many years later, so I don't know, right? No, well, look, the bottom line is, no, look at this. The bottom line is this. Do we believe that Hashem has continuous interaction with his people through his Torah? And if the answer is yes, then those who espouse Torah are granted by Hashem a certain capacity to be able to give the right answer. When you ask a rabbi a question, and the rabbi gives you an answer, a halachic answer, so Hashem wants you to follow him. What if he made a mistake? What if he made a mistake in his understanding? It's possible. He's a human being. He made a mistake. I'm not talking about a rabbi from the Gemara's time. Rabbi today. And he made a mistake. But you followed his instruction. Did you violate Hashem's command? Absolutely not. Why? Because the process Hashem made of Torah is such that he empowers human beings through a process of learning and through a process of diligence and all the rest of it, that they are empowered to espouse his words. So whether you want to go, even if you can go to the Rambam. Okay.
Whether this means his culture or not, he has a bunch of calculations to figure out why you should be.
So a bracha, you're saying a bracha is worse, as it were. But I would say a bracha is lighter, because a bracha is only a rabbinic commandment. But you can get to issues which are much greater than that. The rabbi tells you that the blood that he's looking at is permissible. Your wife doesn't have to go to mikvah. And bracha, no bracha, you could be talking about Isser Kardis, engagement you're talking about a husband and wife engaging in an act that's of the worst proportions in biblical terms, if the rabbi made a mistake on looking at the color. Right? So in a sense, it's worse than a bracha. But, in other words, either we trust that Hashem is actively engaged in the process of our learning or not. And if we're going to, and the Rambam and Ramban are arguing to what degree that goes. So I'm not going to make the argument that even the Ramban's view that the sages had divine intuition and therefore commanded us to light the Menorah. I'm not going to espouse the same level of divine intuition to your local rabbi today. Absolutely not going to do that. And in fact, we have a statement which comes from, can't remember, I believe the Alter Rebbe, that up until the Shachan Taz is written with Ruach HaKodesh. After Shachan Taz lives in the 1500s, something like that, maybe later. 17th century, even later. 1600s. So up until then, the Alter writes Ruach HaKodesh. Post that, questionable in terms of halachic authorities. But nonetheless, even the post Ruach HaKodesh era, and I don't think necessarily Shachan Taz is the same Ruach HaKodesh as the people who said to light the Menorah either. Because obviously there's levels in divine intuition. But even so, even post the time when there's no more divine intuition, once the halacha has been determined by the system of halacha, which is the majority of sages, etc., come to the conclusion that X, Y, Z is permitted or forbidden, that becomes Hashem's will. Right? This is a fundamental tenet of understanding and believing the way Torah operates. Either you follow the Ramban or the Rambam. Either way, you have to acknowledge this. Sorry? It's the same outcome, but with the Ramban, it gives it a more deeper spiritual sense to the Menorah lighting. And the Rambam gives it a more grounded legal authority, if you will. The grounded legal authority on Rambam's view is, Hashem said, follow these guys. You're following these guys. Legal grounds to follow them. Ramban is giving more spiritual oomph to it. These are people who are speaking with divine intuition. So you have like a legal grounding, which is the Rambam's kind of primacy is the legal rationalism, versus the Ramban, the more spiritual, is giving it its more spiritual oomph, if you will. Anyway, much more to be said of this. Sorry, yeah? Who? So that's the thing. The bracha remains the same in both opinions. Yeah, that's right. So in right, as I mentioned, that for the Ramban, the bracha is more literally correct. You commanded us to light the Menorah. For Rambam, it's more of a stretch in terms of the literal translation. You commanded us to light the Menorah, but there's a caveat there. You commanded us to listen to those who told us to light the Menorah. So it's a bit of an extension to the translation of the blessing in Rambam's view, whereas in Ramban, it's more straightforward. Through divine intuition, these people inspired to relate to us God's command. Anyway. Okay, much more to be said, and there's, I'm sure, hundreds of pages, and lots of ink spilt on this topic. Okay, wonderful day, everybody. Tomorrow we'll get into questions of, what types of rabbinic commandments get this kind of status, and what kind of rabbinic commandments do not get this kind of status. And we're going to learn. We'll learn that going not which sages, but what type of commandments, assuming they come from the same sages. Okay, have a wonderful day, everybody.